The hostages, at least 4 of them, the hostages have been rescued from 2 different locations during an operation that happened Saturday during the day. The medical condition is normal, I guess. Hamas-run Ministry of Health in Gaza said at least 274 Palestinians were killed and more than 400 injured in the operation. Gaza Ministry doesn't differentiate between fighters and civilians, so yeah. Spokesperson for the military put the figure fewer than 100. What I really liked is the fact that all the reports start coming out about how bad it was for Hamas. Dozens of injured people are lying on the ground, and medical teams are trying to save them with the simple medical capabilities that they have, said the Gaza Health Ministry. You know what you shouldn't have done? You shouldn't have built the headquarters for Hamas underneath your hospital. Might have worked out a little better for you and your people.
Do you think, Glenn, is there? And this is not. I've never been in this situation, so I don't know. But is there a path to avoid bombings that includes not taking hostages? Is there something about taking the hostages that leads to this? These?
No, those are totally separated. Those two different.
Okay.
Yeah, you're talking apples and eggs, so totally different.
Apples and eggs. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure because at some level, it almost feels like when you take hostages and you torture them and you keep them against their will and do all these horrible things, that might actually be the reason why the Israelis would come in. I don't know if it's tied.
No, apples and eggs. And I say that because oranges, like apples, come from a tree, and then you could trace their roots down. But you can't compare that to something that comes right out of the butt of a chicken. And I think that's what this is these guys, the other thing is you don't want civilians hurt, then don't keep your hostages at civilian homes. You want us to believe that all the Gazans are also oppressed and they just don't like Hamas, and why are you holding them at people's houses? By the way, in one case, enslaving them, I think it was a doctor, and gosh darn it, he was killed. But he took one woman and enslaved her at his house, made her forced her to take care of the house and everything else, which is, a better fate than, honestly, what I think a lot of them would get. But I'm not giving them credit for this. I am giving them credit now to add slavery to the list. However, he was killed. She apparently was in the house. The IDF broke through the door. She thought it was Hamas. She freaked out, just froze. And they said, we're with the IDF. She didn't believe them. And then one of them came up to her and said, ma'am, we have to get you out of here. May I throw you over my shoulder? And she started crying because she knew that's not Hamas. And he threw her over his shoulder and got her out. And yet they're the bad guys somehow or another. I don't get that. I really like the comment that I saw in the news that Israel should have given Hamas some warning that they were coming in. Yeah, me too.
That always works out well. The element of surprise when you tell people about it is always a good part of that.
Yeah, I thought it was unfair on D-Day that Hitler slept through it. We didn't call him up and say, hey, in a couple hours we're coming over, you might want to prepare. We didn't give him any notice,
Yeah, and it's weird because just because we have many reports and such about what Hamas's directive is if someone comes from the IDF or Israel decides to come for these hostages, shoot the hostages in the head. It would be interesting why we wouldn't give them a heads up, just say, hey, you need to get these people shot before we get there, or you're not going to be living up to your bargain with Hamas.
Right.
They're letting Hamas down.
So, And what also is interesting is, we didn't give the heads up in D-Day, and nobody says that's wrong. But then we did give the Japanese 10 days' notice about the bomb and named the cities that we were going to drop it in, and we still get blamed for that one. I mean, I don't. I'm trying to understand. It seems like it doesn't matter what you do.
Again, just like the whole thing we were talking about earlier, I don't have any internal knowledge here, but it almost seems like when Americans or Jews are involved, that side always gets blamed no matter what the circumstances are. It can't possibly be that simple.
Yeah. So, especially the Jews, when the Jews are involved. By the way, I was in the Czech Republic, and do you remember the documentary I did on Kurt Garan, the movie actor from Germany who was Jewish? He thought he was going to survive it, but he had been making fun of Hitler and the Nazis for like 5 years before they came to power. And no, not really. And he was forced to make this propaganda film at this concentration camp that they had in this city, and it looked fantastic. I mean, everybody who was anybody in the Jewish, the scholars, the scientists, the orchestral players, et cetera, all the people that the German people might know, they were all sent to this one city in Czechoslovakia. It happened to be, I didn't even know it when I went. It's right outside of Prague. And it is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. It's a city. It's not like a concentration camp. It's like this beautiful little idyllic city. But if you know what they used it for, you're like, oh my gosh, this is creepy. And people still live there. They moved in afterwards. And it's almost, you'd like it, Stu, because you and I are fascinated by things like Chernobyl, that have this horrible history, and then they're just vacated for a long time. Mm-hmm. People just started living back in this city, and it's really, really weird. But one thing I noticed is that we're doing a lot of the same things that they were doing back then, which is, a little bit disturbing.
Disconcerting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a little bit. By the way, so we apparently provided support for the raid. Do you believe that?
Normally, I would say
yes.
Yeah, like that's like our main role. Like that would be the thing, especially considering Americans were at stake. American lives are at stake with the hostages as well. You'd think it would be the main focus of our country right now, right? Like to make sure that we get our hostages back. I don't know. Now it's so strange because I don't understand. Biden seems to be very, very like back and forth on this, where he will sometimes say things that I think are actually pretty good, and then he'll completely reverse himself as soon as Ilhan Omar says something. Because I don't necessarily believe that we helped, but also I don't know why we would communicate that to the media either if we didn't help. It doesn't seem like this message Biden wants to send.
Here's the bigger thing. Would Israel take our help for something like this? One leak, and it would have been all over. One leak.
Yeah. Would you trust?
You're going to bring the United States military and intel into that world and trust them to keep their mouths quiet? No way. Yeah, I don't believe it.
Because even if
I think it is. I think Israel said that, to kind of keep up the pretense that we're all in this together. But I would be shocked if it was the administration that said, let's do this together and let's keep it quiet. And it kept quiet.
I mean, it's possible like we gave some guidance as to where we thought they were, maybe some surveillance that supported the operation. But not. You're right. I think as far as telling them when it was going to happen, I mean, just think of like every like schlocky intern that works for the Biden administration. Not that they get all that stuff, but there's so many of these advisors that are so anti-Israel. Even if you believe Biden is an old school Democrat and has some friendliness to Israel still, even if you buy that, you buy that he's Chuck Schumer 1997. If you want to believe that, or actually Joe Biden 1997, he's changed so many times. But like, if you believe that, maybe you'd think he'd still be in favor of this. But like, you can't trust any of the people around him. I mean, they're all like 28-year-old bloggers.
Agency. Yeah, I know. And the intel agency, which is hand in hand now with the State Department, none of those people want to do anything for Israel. I would find it I would find it irresponsible on Israel's part to include anyone in the Biden administration into their plans, other than, hey, would you help us do some surveillance, satellite surveillance? Sure. When? Well, we just started the operation about 15 minutes ago. And here's what we'd like you to surveil.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because that's the way some countries will do that with their allies. We start a war, we start something, and we'll call them up just as we're launching the war. So there's nothing they can do to stop it or hurt it.
Yeah. And of course, that would be certainly a main concern of Israel. I will say, Glenn, have you ever seen another example, and I couldn't come up with one off the top of my head, but the other example in history where when you have an operation, a wartime operation, to free hostages, that the side that freed the hostages is the one getting the criticism? I can't think of another example ever. Like you mentioned the camps. Like, we killed a lot of innocent Germans in our efforts to free the camps. Right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of them, maybe more than we actually freed. That's something that we make movies about to honor the memory of those efforts. You don't criticize the army that's going in there and freeing the hostages. Immediately after this, it was like 4 hostages freed, but the Gazans said 200 people were killed. Like, we're supposed to compare those numbers and be like, oh, well, 200 is more than 4, and the Gazans said it, so we should believe it. Like, what?
Right. And even if it is true, by the way, you were keeping those 4 in the homes of regular people.
Yep.
You're the one putting them in danger. You're the ones that built the infrastructure underneath the hospital. You did it because you like human shields. That's why they're there. So any of that stuff is just garbage.